Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Evan had always been a methodical man. Every step of his day was recorded in a small blue diary that he carried everywhere, almost like an extension of his own memory. It was a practice he had maintained since he was young, a way to make sense of the silent routines that, to him, carried importance. Work, notes, small reflections on what he did, where he went wrong, where he succeeded. Everything was noted with precision. But over the months, this diary began to reflect more outpourings than concrete facts. Words like distance, coldness, and silence started filling the pages, like scars of a relationship that was crumbling without fanfare. Inside the house, what was once a home had turned into a heavy space, where any attempt at conversation sounded like an inconvenience. Evan tried to start talks, recount his day, comment on a new project, even suggest a short trip to reconnect. But every sentence he spoke seemed to hit an invisible wall. Lena, his wife, no longer hid her disinterest. Monosyllabic responses, absent looks, impatient sighs. It seemed like anything he said was a burden, a delay for her. On a random Friday, after a tiring workday, Evan returned home hoping it would be a different kind of day. A movie together, pizza, any moment that might rekindle a spark. When he walked through the door, all he found was the low sound of the television and Lena on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Without taking her eyes off the screen, she merely muttered a greeting that sounded more like an obligation than genuine interest. Evan approached, trying to mention an invitation from a colleague to an art exhibition over the weekend, but before he even finished his sentence, Lena said she already had other plans, without explaining what they were. It was as if her life had already moved on while he was still stuck in a time that no longer existed. That night, the invitation from some colleagues for happy hour seemed, for the first time, a better option than trying to fill a void that refused to be filled. Evan, who always declined such invitations to prioritize his marriage, accepted this time. As he put on his shoes near the door, Lena, sitting on the couch, asked without looking away from her phone, "How long are you going to stay there?" Evan hesitated for a second, adjusting his watch, and replied, "I don't know, a few hours." She just nodded slightly, returning to lose herself in the screen. It felt strange leaving that house without the feeling of leaving something important behind. At the bar, surrounded by light conversations and smiles, he felt out of place, as if he were watching life happen for others while his remained in suspension. Then Camille, a coworker known for her kindness, approached. Camille hesitated before speaking. She joked about how Evan seemed more serious than usual, and he, with a sad smile, commented that he didn't have much practice relaxing. The conversation lasted a few minutes until, with a concerned look, she changed her tone. She said she needed to tell him something, even though she wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. She explained that a few days ago, when leaving a cafe downtown, she saw Lena. She was with another man. It wasn't just the company, it was the way they were together, laughing intimately, hands casually touching, exchanging glances with familiarity that left no room for innocent explanations. Camille described the scene carefully, without sensationalism but also without softening what she had witnessed. Evan listened in silence, feeling the blood rush to his face and his hands sweat. His mind tried to rationalize, thinking of possible excuses, maybe it was a cousin, an old friend, a coincidence. But deep down, he had known for a long time. The distance, the empty looks, the silent disdain, it all screamed a truth he had refused to accept. Now, hearing it from someone who had always been trustworthy seemed to strip away the last layers of denial he still clung to. After Camille finished speaking, Evan thanked her, trying to maintain his composure. He said he would understand if she wanted to forget the matter, that he didn't blame her for bringing such an uncomfortable piece of news. Camille simply responded that she thought he deserved to know, that no one should live in darkness out of fear of pain. Feeling the weight of that conversation crush whatever little lightness he had left that night, Evan quickly said goodbye and left the bar. He barely exchanged words with his colleagues on the way out, crossing the street with a heavy head and heart. Her words echoed in his mind as he walked toward the car, and without thinking twice, he decided to return home. Each step toward the door felt harder than the last, as if he were carrying along everything he had refused to see until now. When he opened the door, the familiar smell of the house hit him like a blow. The same sofa, the same decor, the same environment he had tried so hard to protect for so long. But this time, something was different. A strange energy hung in the air, as if the space knew it was about to witness an ending. Evan walked down the hallway and, upon reaching the living room, he saw. There was Lena, sitting with an unknown man. They held hands on the coffee table, talking quietly, laughing about something Evan would never understand. Time seemed to stop. Neither of them noticed his presence immediately. When Lena's eyes finally met his, there was a brief moment of shock, followed by an expression that mixed guilt and defiance. Evan just stared at them. No shouting, no drama. With a firm and cold voice, he told the man, "Get out of my house. Now." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lena, seated on the couch, didn't say a word. She just lowered her eyes, as if any attempt at justification would be useless against overwhelming evidence. The man, visibly embarrassed, got up without saying anything and left through the door, avoiding eye contact with Evan. Evan remained there, looking at Lena for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Without needing words, he gave a simple nod, denying, a gesture that carried everything he felt at that moment, disappointment, and distance. Then he turned and left too, taking with him only the certainty that nothing there deserved to be rebuilt. As soon as Evan walked out the door that night, he didn't know where to go. He had the car keys in his hand, but no destination. He drove through the streets of the city without thinking, just trying to escape the image that kept invading his mind. He stopped in front of a discreet motel, the kind that goes unnoticed, and went in. He paid for a short stay, went up to the room, and threw himself onto the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling as if that would help him understand what had just happened. Sleep came late, forced by exhaustion and emotional fatigue. The next morning, he woke up with a heavy mind. Still lying in bed, he stared at the phone tossed beside him. No message from Lena, no sign of regret, no request for explanation. It was as if that betrayal had been premeditated, as if the scene he'd witnessed was just another page in a story she no longer cared to hide. Evan took a quick shower and, before leaving, took a deep breath, trying to gather the courage to return to the house where, just hours earlier, he had seen his marriage crumble. When he arrived, everything was in the same place, as if life within those walls had continued without him. Lena was in the kitchen, making coffee like any other morning. When she saw Evan come in, she just gave him a quick glance and returned her attention to the cup she was holding. No words, no sign of guilt, nothing. Evan passed by her in silence, walking to the bedroom to grab some clothes. Each step felt like it weighed tons. He wanted to ask why, to yell, to demand answers. But something inside him said that any words would be useless. The decision had already been made, and it wasn't his. Without looking back, Evan grabbed what he needed and left again. He drove to work like a zombie, trying to focus on tasks so he wouldn't fall apart. During lunch break, he searched his phone for contacts of divorce lawyers. He didn't want to prolong that cycle of pain any longer than necessary. He found the name of a law office recommended by a colleague and called, scheduling a meeting for the following morning. The hours dragged on. Every time he picked up his phone, he hoped to find a message from Lena, maybe an attempt to explain, to justify herself. But the phone remained silent. It was confirmation of what he already knew deep down: she didn't want to fight, didn't want to save anything. She was simply there, fulfilling the formalities of a life that, for her, had lost its meaning long ago. That night, Evan slept again at the motel. The idea of sharing the same roof with Lena, even for a few more hours, seemed unbearable. In the small room, sitting on the edge of the bed, he opened his diary. He wrote non-stop for nearly an hour, pouring out all the thoughts that needed to come out. He wrote about the moment he saw the two of them holding hands, about her silence that morning, about the pain of knowing the love he had given so earnestly had been treated as disposable. When the meeting with the lawyer finally arrived, Evan was determined. He explained the situation in a few words, signed the initial papers, and began the official separation process. He returned home that afternoon to find Lena still there, organizing some things in the closet, as if preparing to leave. They exchanged only a cold, distant look. She too seemed to have accepted the end. No tears, no dramatic scenes. Just the silent closure of something that had been dead for a long time. In the days that followed, Evan distanced himself from everything that reminded him of his former marriage. He changed his phone number, took a leave from work for a few days, and found a small furnished apartment to rent temporarily. He took only what he needed. He didn't want to carry unnecessary memories, let alone the ghosts of a life that no longer belonged to him. It was in this small, simple, and history-free space that he began to rebuild his life. In the early nights, the silence seemed unbearable. Without the sound of the TV left on by Lena, without the noises of a house inhabited by two people who barely spoke, Evan finally heard his own breathing, his own thoughts. And as painful as it was to face everything head-on, it was also liberating to realize that he was, for the first time in a long while, free to rewrite his own story. He started with small gestures. He bought a used bicycle and started riding again like he did in his teens. He spent hours riding through parks and quiet streets, feeling the wind on his face, trying to erase from his memory the weight he still carried. He kept the diary in his backpack and, sometimes, stopped on a random bench to write, transforming the pain into words. He discovered that he had more strength inside him than he imagined. During this time, Camille continued to appear in his life almost imperceptibly. Small messages asking how he was doing, casual coffee invites, words of encouragement that arrived at the right moments. Evan noticed that, unlike what he experienced with Lena, this friendship didn't demand anything beyond what he could offer. It was sincere, light, real. Each day was a silent battle to rebuild who he truly was. And even though the process was slow and painful, Evan knew he was, finally, on the right path. The days passed with the typical slowness of someone carrying open wounds. Evan dedicated his hours to simple routines, working, biking, writing in his journal. It was as if he were relearning how to live, discovering an existence that no longer needed to be shaped by silences and indifference. Sometimes, the loneliness weighed more than he could bear. On those nights, he picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, paused on Camille's name, and after a few minutes of hesitation, closed the device again, convinced he didn't want to seem weak. But Camille, with the patience of someone who understands pain's words can't reach, continued to be present, subtly. She always found a way to make Evan feel less alone. One day, she sent a picture of a book she thought he'd like. Another day, she sent a quick message asking how his bike ride had been. Small gestures that demanded nothing, just showing that someone cared. And that was exactly what Evan needed, someone who didn't ask for anything in return, someone who just existed alongside him, without pressure. One Sunday afternoon, sitting on a park bench, watching children play in the distance, Evan decided it was time to do something different. The rebuilding process couldn't just be about surviving the days. It was necessary to allow life to happen again. He picked up his phone, and with a nervous feeling in his stomach he hadn't felt in a long time, he texted Camille, inviting her to dinner. He thought about deleting the message before sending it. He thought about giving up. But at that moment, something stronger spoke inside him, the desire to start over. Camille replied a few minutes later, accepting the invitation with a subtle enthusiasm that warmed Evan's heart in a way he could barely describe. They set a date for Saturday night. During the week, Evan caught himself smiling randomly as he planned small details. He chose a simple but cozy restaurant where they could talk without rushing. He swapped his old, worn-out clothes for a shirt he'd bought a while back but never worn. He paid attention to his appearance, preparing for something important but without trying to hide the scars he carried. When he arrived at the restaurant, he saw Camille already waiting near the entrance. She smiled when she saw him, a smile so genuine that Evan felt part of the weight he carried dissolve right then and there. They walked together to the table, exchanging shy greetings and laughing at small comments. During dinner, the conversation flowed like a calm river. They talked about books, dream vacations, old movies. At no point did they need to force intimacy. It simply happened. After dinner, Camille suggested they go to a small bar where, according to her, there was live music and a space for dancing. Evan hesitated for a moment but agreed. For years, he had convinced himself he didn't like dancing, that he was too clumsy. But that night, next to Camille, he realized he enjoyed laughing at his awkward steps, feeling the lightness of spinning aimlessly, living without worrying so much about getting it right. While dancing, Evan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: belonging. As if, after so many years of trying to fit into a life not meant for him, he was finally exactly where he was supposed to be. They didn't need to say much. The exchanged glances, the subtle smiles, and the calmness of the moment said it all. It was a beginning. A fragile one, yes, but full of a truth he had never felt with Lena. When the night ended, Evan walked her to her car. During the walk, the silence between them was comfortable, full of unspoken promises. They stopped next to her car and stood there for a few seconds, just looking at each other, without hurry, without fear. She stepped closer, hugged Evan lightly and sincerely. A hug that demanded nothing, just offered warmth. Evan closed his eyes for a moment, feeling his heart beat in a new rhythm, stronger, more alive. Camille stepped back with a smile, got into her car, and drove away, leaving Evan standing there, looking into the void with a sense of gratitude. He knew the road to complete healing would still be long. There would still be difficult days, memories that hurt. But, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. He was allowing something new to bloom. Something built on respect, admiration, and sincerity. Something that, unlike what he had lived in the past, could finally make him happy. Evan walked to his car with a light heart. He got in, started the engine, and drove through the city, no particular destination in mind, just enjoying the sense of freedom he hadn't felt in so long. That night, before sleeping, he opened his diary, and instead of jotting down a sad outpouring, he wrote just one sentence: "Today, for the first time in a long time, I smiled for real." In the days following that first dinner, Evan felt like someone who had emerged from a long winter. The exchanges of messages with Camille became more frequent, the meetings became part of the new routine he was slowly building with care. It was as if every smile of hers, every spontaneous word, placed another brick on this new path. There were no exaggerated promises, theatrical declarations, or haste. It was all light, almost shy, but true. A feeling that grew slowly, solidly, and silently restored Evan's faith, which he thought he had lost. The divorce was finalized. Legally free, emotionally under reconstruction. The wounds were still there, but they no longer bled like before. Evan began to think about the future without the weight of having to justify every step. It was a new sensation, strange and good at the same time. One day, while having coffee at a bakery downtown, he received a text that instantly sent a chill down his spine. The sender was an unknown number. The message was short, almost casual: "Can we meet? It's important." His first reaction was to ignore it. That chapter of his life seemed closed, locked away in a drawer he didn't want to open again. But something about the message made him uneasy. After a few minutes of indecision, he replied directly, "Who is this?" The response came almost immediately. It was the man he had seen with Lena, the same one who had destroyed in seconds the last illusions Evan still carried about his marriage. Without explaining details, the man asked to meet in person. He said there was something important to share. Against the instinct of self-preservation screaming at him to move on and forget everything, Evan agreed to meet. They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe, at a time when there would be few people around. He wanted to hear what the man had to say, even though he already imagined little could change what was already done. Deep down, perhaps he was seeking closure, one last piece to fit before burying the past for good. When Evan arrived, the man was already waiting, seated at a corner table. He wore simple clothes, looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his hands constantly, like someone who knew he was carrying a bomb about to explode. Evan approached cautiously, sat down, and waited. Without beating around the bush, the man began to speak. He said that what had happened between him and Lena wasn't as spontaneous as Evan thought. He claimed that Camille had approached him months ago, long before everything blew up. According to him, Camille had orchestrated the entire plan to destroy Evan's marriage, hiring him to get close to Lena, gain her trust, and create situations that would inevitably lead to infidelity. Every word cut Evan inside like sharp knives. It was hard to breathe. He tried to keep a neutral expression, but inside, he felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His mind refused to accept this story. Thinking that Camille, the person who extended a hand when the world seemed to collapse, could have orchestrated everything was so absurd it felt unreal. But there he was, listening to every detail of this confession that seemed carefully rehearsed to destroy the little hope he still carried. The man explained that, initially, he accepted it for the money. He said Camille had offered a reasonable amount to approach Lena, create intimacy, and somehow plant doubt and weariness that would result in the separation. The narrative was full of sordid nuances, and as he spoke, Evan tried to read his face for any clue that would help him understand if it was true or just another layer of lies. Instinct told him to run, but the need to know told him to stay. When the man finished speaking, Evan remained silent for a few moments. Without promising anything, he simply stood up, thanked him with a coldness that surprised even himself, paid his bill, and left. In the car, hands on the wheel, he stared into the void for long minutes. If this were true, everything he had built with Camille would be based on an even crueler lie than Lena's betrayal. And if it were false, then someone was trying to sabotage his happiness in an even more perverse way. Back at the apartment, Evan took a deep breath, picked up his phone, and called Camille. When she answered, her voice sounded as always, calm, gentle. He asked her to meet him at a nearby park. He needed to talk in person. Camille agreed, without questioning. When they met, Evan got straight to the point, without beating around the bush. He told her about the encounter with the man, about the accusations. He observed every reaction of hers with the precision of someone whose heart had been hurt too many times to allow himself another mistake. Camille listened without interrupting. Her wide eyes, the expression of genuine surprise, not of someone pretending. When he finished speaking, she simply said she would never do something so vile. That she would never destroy his life in that way. That she too had suffered seeing what Lena was doing, but she always respected his space, waiting for him to see the truth on his own. The pain in her voice was palpable, and Evan, even with a confused mind, could feel sincerity in those words. The dilemma was crushing. Evan wanted to believe. Everything inside him begged to believe. But the doubt was planted. How to trust again after everything he had lived through? Still, at that moment, something inside him chose to listen to his heart instead of suspicion. Evan knew the man had dark motives, that there was much more behind this story than met the eye. And, looking into Camille's eyes, he decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. He decided to trust once more, even if it meant risking being hurt again. The choice was made there, silently, while Camille held his hand firmly, as if promising, without words, that this time, he would have something real. Even though fear still haunted his nights, Evan knew that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the ability to move forward despite it. The days following the meeting with Camille were confusing for Evan. The doubt still lingered like a persistent shadow, even though everything inside him wanted to believe her. The story he had heard from Lena's lover left invisible scars, making it hard to fully trust again. Even though Camille had shown sincerity in every gesture, there was still a slightly open door inside Evan whispering, "What if it's true?" Tired of living tormented, Evan decided he needed to end this story definitively. He couldn't move forward carrying poisoned doubts. He needed the naked, raw truth in front of his eyes, without detours, without intermediaries. That's when he made a different decision from the previous time they met. He wouldn't go alone. He called two trusted friends, Patrick and Noah, men who had proven their loyalty in critical moments of his life. He quickly explained everything, asked for help. Both agreed immediately, without hesitation. They arranged to meet in a discreet area of the city, an abandoned parking lot where, at that hour, few curious passers-by would be around. Lena's lover agreed to come, perhaps still thinking he could maintain the lie. When he arrived and saw Evan accompanied, he hesitated. His expression revealed more than any words. Evan was direct. No threats, no raised voice. He just looked him in the eye and firmly requested, "Tell the truth. Now." Everything. Patrick and Noah, in silence, stood beside him, creating a presence that made it clear they weren't there for games. The man tried to resist for a few minutes. He gave vague answers, avoided eye contact, scratched the back of his neck multiple times. But the pressure was immense, the atmosphere tense. Evan moved closer and said, "You're not leaving here until you tell everything. I don't want assumptions anymore. I want facts." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Faced with that firmness and the weight of their stares, Lena's lover finally broke. He poured out words that seemed bitter even to him. He admitted that, yes, he had lied. That Camille had no involvement in any of it. That, in reality, it was Lena who had approached him months after the divorce, offering a generous sum of money to go after Evan, fabricate the story, plant doubt in his mind, and poison his relationship with Camille. The reason? He said with a shaky voice, "She couldn't stand to see you happy. She couldn't accept that you were rebuilding your life with someone else while she drowned in her own bitterness. She wanted to destroy what you had with Camille. She wanted you to distrust, to end it, to be alone like she was." The words hit Evan like a silent storm. It was hard to process so much malice coming from someone with whom he had shared years of his life. Lena didn't just want to get rid of him. She wanted to see him broken, lost, unhappy. She wanted the satisfaction of knowing that without her, he would never find peace. The real betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional, poisonous, profound. The man still tried to justify himself, saying he needed the money, that he hadn't thought about the consequences at the time. Evan just stared at him in silence. There were no excuses. Only facts. Without thanking him, without saying goodbye, Evan turned his back and left, with Patrick and Noah walking beside him, respecting his silence. In the car, alone after saying goodbye to his friends, Evan felt a devastating mix of relief and sadness. He finally had the truth in his hands. A painful truth, but one that also cleared the path he wanted to follow. Camille had never betrayed him. Her love was sincere, pure, exactly as he had always wanted to believe. It was Lena who carried the poison. It was Lena who, even after everything, still tried to chain Evan to the past. Evan understood, there, with brutal clarity, that some people prefer to see others fallen because they are incapable of rising on their own. And that there are battles you don't win with revenge or anger, but with distance, silence, and the courage to move forward without looking back. When he got home, he found Camille sitting on the couch, reading a book, waiting for him like someone who never doubted the strength between them. Without saying a word, Evan walked to her, knelt down, and hugged her tightly. No words were needed. In the embrace, Camille understood that Evan had returned whole, without doubts, without fears, without the invisible chains that once bound him. From that moment on, Evan made a conscious choice: never again would he let the pains of the past define his future. He had been betrayed, humiliated, deceived, but he would not be destroyed. On the contrary, he would be rebuilt. Stronger. Lighter. More truthful. And with Camille by his side, he knew that, this time, the story they would write together would be built on trust, loyalty, and real love. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.